All right, everyone. It is that time of week. It's Tuesday. We're doing two shows this week, but unfortunately, fortunately for me, I get a little bit more talking time. My co-host Travis is out this week, so I'm running it solo. As usual, it's your host Dustin Blanton, and this is the Losing Sucks Fantasy Football Podcast. And today, I am joined by one of my favorite content creators in the space. He is a producer and co-host over there at the Wake Up with Ray G show over on YouTube, all part of the Wake Up TV channel over there. You can follow him at your boy J Rich on Twitter. Everybody joining me today is Jordan Richards. What's going on, Jordan? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you for that great intro. It wasn't quite as good as Klug's nicest guy in the world, but
Right.
I will take it. One of your favorite content creators.
Of
It's good
course.
enough for me. I appreciate that.
It's
How are you doing,
definitely
Dustin?
definitely top two on this show for sure. For
Thank
sure.
you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I feel like that one went pretty well. Didn't stumble over my words. I'd give it a solid 8. We're good. We're
Yeah,
good.
for sure. For sure. I've done a lot worse, so you're good.
All right, that makes me feel better. So we'll just get into it, man. So one, how you doing? Hope you're doing. I know it's pretty late over there for you.
A little bit.
Thank you for taking the time this evening to,
Oh, of course. Anytime.
to chill with me, talk some football. There's a lot to go over. With cuts happening, some surprises. Obviously, we're going to talk about the demise of Trey Lance now that Jimmy G is going to be the ultimate starter, according to most of Twitter. So we'll get into that. First, I want to clear the air on something that happened, because it runs rent free in my mind, because ever since the Fantasy Football Expo, and I want the people to hear it from me. I introduced myself to you as one does when meeting people at the expo, and it was mid bite of a taco. Okay, so I'd like to apologize for one, interrupting what looked like a delicious lunch, dinner, whatever it was, and then walking away awkwardly, because I'm pretty sure I stood there for a second, said, "Hey, I'm Dustin. Nice to meet you. Really, really love what you're doing," and then had nothing else. That was all I planned.
Don't worry. Okay, so I will set the stage for people watching and listening about my side of the story, right? So it was about 3 o'clock, I'd say. I drove here. So I woke up at 5 a.m. I drove from Toronto to the expo, did a little bit of shopping along the way. So yeah, it's not that far. It's about 5 hours. But so that was my first meal of the day. Didn't really stop or eat or anything. So it was around 3 o'clock, first meal of the day. So when you see me gnawing on this food, it was because I was starving at that point. But the funny part about that is not just that moment. You were the first person that I didn't know that came up to me. So that alone was kind of its own surreal moment. And I think I did tell you in the moment. I told kind of the next person after, like later on in the day, I was like, look, I don't mean to be rude or anything. It's just a different, like a weird situation for me because you're coming up to me and you know who I am. And I have no idea necessarily who you are. And it's definitely not to be rude, but I obviously appreciated it a lot. The other funny thing about that was that we were with Gene and Ike of Off the Line, who do a podcast for Destination Devi, and then Ray was there too. And so they got food first, and they just were eating. They went to the buffet, they started eating. I'm like, oh, damn, is there free food? And they were like, yeah, like, oh, it's over there.
Right.
As soon as I go get my food, sit down, some lady comes and gives Ike a bill. I'm like, excuse me, sir. I'm like, excuse me, sir. You did not tell me that this food wasn't free. And he was like,
no way.
Well, this is news to me too, because at the expo, you just walk up to the buffet, you get your food, you sit down, and when they see you sit down, bam, they hit you with a bill. So yeah, that was a little surprise. It wasn't too expensive, but yeah, that wasn't very fun for me when I asked someone, hey, is this free? And they kind of just said, you didn't say anything, but they kind of gave me the okay. But I do appreciate you obviously reaching out for the pod and for introducing yourself. Definitely makes it easier coming on here when it's a familiar face. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Trying to put a face to the name is definitely a task in and of itself. So Expo went great though. It was awesome seeing you, seeing Ray, also awkwardly introducing myself. It was a whole theme for the weekend.
Definitely.
It was good. Glad to have you on. Thanks again. I'm going to probably thank you 15 times this show. But hey, past the pleasantries. We'll get right into some football because, like I said, there's a lot that happened over the last few
Hmm.
days. Let's start off with cuts because cuts happened. I don't know if you had a favorite guy that might have gotten released that you weren't expecting. A name that stuck out to me was Marlon Mack. Wasn't really
Yeah.
sure about. Honestly, I thought he was going to be the Marlon Mack sacrifice that was to Jonathan
Yeah.
Taylor. I thought he was going to lead the way. He's almost like Tyrod tailoring for running backs. You know, he
That's a great point. Yeah. So Damian Pierce should be pretty good this year.
yeah. By my standards, he'll be a top 5 running back. According, if Tyrod Taylor tells any sort of tale. Was there anyone else that stuck out to you today once cuts were released or the last couple days?
For cuts, I wouldn't say so. I think it's more so the guys that were kept. I know that
Mm-hmm.
the Cleveland Browns kept Mike Woods. That was kind of surprising to me. He was
Oh
kind of a
wow.
roster bubble guy, a guy that I think is really talented, but for fantasy, we'll see,
Right.
right? There
Right.
wasn't a ton of surprises. I think Marlon Mack is the largest story here.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought he would make the team. Him, Rex Burkhead, and Damian Pierce is kind of a three-headed monster in Houston. But now it
Right.
looks like Damian Pierce is going to be the guy. I think the question for me, and I'll openly ask this to you, is
Right.
where is his ADP going to be too high to where you're like, I
Whew.
don't know for this season? Because it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of in like the 7th round, then it was creeping up to the
Right.
6th round. Now with
Mm-hmm.
Marlon Mack being cut, there's no real fear of him losing first and second down carries. We have Damian
Right.
Pierce as kind of the primary rusher. Hopefully he gets receiving work, but Rex Burkhead will
Yeah.
probably factor in as well. What point is too
Mm-hmm.
high for you for him in redraft so far?
For redraft, I don't think I think the 6th round is getting pretty rich. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think the community's kind of forgetting that it's still the Texans. You know, I know that Lovey Smith wants to establish it. That's
Oh
just kind of
yeah.
what that's just, being a Bears fan, I know that. But honestly, I don't know how effective this offense is going to be. We forget that yes, there's some upside with Davis Mills, but there's still only Brandon Cooks. There's maybe Nico Collins. You have to kind of
Yeah.
talk yourself into Brevin Jordan. Other than that, like Damian Pierce isn't going to be some bell cow guy who, is he enough to stave off, Royce Freeman and Rex Burkhead as weary of a combination that is. I think 6th round is probably as high as I'd even start thinking about drafting him in a redraft.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like maybe you could talk me into the 5th round, but that's usually when you're targeting those wide
Right.
receivers, or maybe again, if you went, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, could
Mm-hmm.
you maybe use him as your first running back in like the late 5th, early 6th, potentially?
You could.
Again, he's probably gonna get the work. 200 carries is probably what we're looking at for sure. We don't know about the
Right.
receiving game, but like you said, a low upside offense, which is kind of
Right.
a big issue for me overall. But again, the volume should be there, score you points every week, so at least you have that working in your favor.
Right. I mean, really, the question I would ask you then is if you're taking Damian Pierce, who is now, like you said, is going the 6th. If we see him rise into the 5th, you really have to start thinking: are you taking
Yeah.
him, or would you? Personally, I would rather take a guy like Tyler Algier in like the 12th round, who, granted, probably a much worse. Well, I can't even say much worse because really, where are we putting the Texans' offense? Are they bottom half? Are we going to give them that much credit?
I mean, what you're saying is definitely true. Like, how much better is Atlanta? I mean, the skill guys in Atlanta, I think, are considerably
Sure.
better, maybe, probably. At least we
Right.
project that. Algier, 5th round pick, Pierce, obviously a 4th round pick.
Right.
Talent, I think it's probably pretty close. The thing with Pierce
Right.
that's hard is the college evaluation, you didn't really see his full skill set all the time. It was kind
Right.
of in spurts, so you didn't know what he would look like as a full-time contributor. I think
Mm-hmm.
that Algier could be just as good, although, again, I think you can always make this case, right? Like, well, I'll take the guy who's later because he's
Right.
cheaper, right? But at some point, you have to take a shot on somebody. I think that's where I think Pierce, for everything we've seen so far, he's probably going to be the guy this season, and for Dynasty,
For sure.
probably even beyond that. So you probably
Really.
should take a shot on him just because the production should continue. I couldn't imagine them
Yeah.
replacing him after one season, maybe 2 seasons, but I doubt a running back's going to come next class. They're going to say, yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
want that guy over Pierce. But again, things
Right.
change a lot. Like people were pegging Philip Lindsay as the next guy, and he was an undrafted free agent, and he kind of
True.
still got run the second year and beyond. So
Yeah.
I doubt Pierce is going away anytime soon, especially with how early they kind of committed to him overall.
Yeah, I think definitely in a dynasty scope, I think you're looking at a guy who will hold some value. Um, but you're probably right. Looking at the future, he's probably looking at some sort of committee. I don't necessarily know that he has the talent
Yeah.
to give them the confidence that okay, this is the guy we can run into the ground for a few years. I'm looking forward to it. A guy that I'm really looking forward to, and that I saw that he made the roster. I'm still holding out or holding a flame for Julius Chestnut. I don't know if I'm the only one left, but he made the Texans or the Titans roster, and
Yeah.
I personally like him more than Hassan Haskins. And I think if
Yeah.
Derrick Henry shows his age a little bit more, I think that's a guy that might make some noise.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I'm with you. I think the problem where that argument sort of falls short is I just feel like Hassan Haskins is the guy that could not replace
sure.
Derrick Henry's production, but from
Mhm.
a role, body type, style. Again, he
Right,
gets it done and it's ugly, especially what he did at Michigan. But I feel
right,
like that's maybe why they want him on the roster. But again, you never know. Like they also have
sure,
Dontrell Hilliard there who can kind of fill that role. But Chestnut, I think, provides
yeah,
something that they don't really use enough, but they probably could use in the offense as more of a playmaker type. I think that's where his role could fit in, but it seems like he's fourth on the depth chart right now. But good to see him make the roster. Maybe he can do some things beyond just simply practice squad and that type of stuff throughout the year.
right, right, definitely, yeah. For sure. Haskins is a guy I've got in a couple places, but still prefer Chestnut. I'm
Yeah.
not going to give up hope. Not going to give up hope. A couple names though that have resurfaced. One not really relevant for fantasy really at all that I thought was really shocking to see him move. Laviska Shenault. Is he revived? Is he?
Um,
I
I
can't even
mean,
get it out. I can't.
When
I
you get
just
cut, they didn't get cut, he got traded.
right?
But when you
He's
get
traded. He has
basically
value.
cut by the Jaguars, that is something. Like you don't see
Yeah.
guys get cut from the Jaguars very often and find their way into fantasy relevance. So I think that's the case I will make against LaVisca, but I'm sure his stands are still definitely out there. Where are you at with Visca? And do you think maybe there's hope in this Curtis Samuel role now that he's moved over to Washington?
Yeah, boy, you hit it right on the head. It's the Curtis Samuel corollary. Is he the guy? Look, he's not, I don't in my opinion he's nowhere near as dynamic as Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel can run routes.
And he's faster too.
And he's faster. Yeah, that helps. Laviska was always a Ross prospect coming out of college, and it was more of a hope. It was the comparisons that people were making. This guy's the next AJ Brown. The big slot guy, the slant and bulldoze, and then he gets
the
to
Wildcat in
exactly
Colorado
right.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, wild, just manufactured touches, which I could make the argument maybe we're seeing some of that with Treylon Burks, but I think that's extending myself a little bit. But Laviska's a guy I was intrigued to see move. I don't see him being relevant. And look, if DJ Moore, let's say, knock on wood, something happens to DJ Moore, you're not going to all of a sudden see, Laviska shoot up the rankings and be a guy that you're going to want to start, because at that point you're looking at Robbie Anderson, Laviska Shenault, and Terrace Marshall all being thrown the same passes by Baker Mayfield. So, I'm good.
Yeah,
man.
didn't even name Christian McCaffrey or Chuba Hubbard, or is it Brandon Zylstra or whatever the other guy
I've
there?
never heard of any of those guys. I have no idea.
Oh, just so many guys that Visca would have to overcome to become fantasy relevant again.
Right.
Yeah, I don't foresee that happening at all for his future. But crazier things have happened, I suppose.
Right. For sure. Well, maybe just as crazy is. Can you talk me through the move of the Saints moving Sauce Gardner over to the already stacked Philadelphia Eagles defense? Can you walk me through this?
Man, it's funny. So my best friend is a Saints fan, and he loves CJ Gardner-Johnson, loves him.
He's a pistol.
And we were talking about the impact of what he could be, and it just comes down to contract, right? I think he was telling me that Nick Underhill put out a report that apparently he was just being a dick at practices and not really listening to the coaching staff. And apparently Dennis Allen that's the thing, right? And that's kind of what we talked about is you see him on the field and he's kind of an asshole. Right. And yeah, that works when you're good and you're on the team and your friends and your buddies. But when that personality starts to show itself in other areas that conflict with the team and other things,
Right.
bad things are going to happen. But, he's looking for an extension. Apparently wanted to play more safety so he could get paid as a safety. They play him in nickel corner.
Wild.
So we got traded. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. Fiery personality. But again, I think that,
Yeah.
they brought in Tyrann Mathieu that can hopefully be the heartbeat of that defense. But in a lot of ways, Gardner Johnson was the guy who really got that team riled up. It's not really Lattimore's role. DeMario Davis does that a little bit, but it was definitely surprising because, again, this is kind of one of those things with that Saints defense. In my opinion, one of the big X factors of them beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers twice a year was Gardner Johnson playing phenomenally well in the slot. So we'll see how that impacts them. I'm not sure how well they're going to replace them. I think they'll be okay from a team standpoint and the personnel, but it's the energy that he brought to the field every week that they will definitely miss for sure on defense.
Absolutely. It's a good point. And that defense is already looking scary in the middle. So having another talented corner on the outside, boy, I've called it from the beginning of the season. I think Philadelphia takes that division this year.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. Dallas is I don't want to say Dallas is in trouble, but you look at what they have on the outside based on what they have had. And I just don't know how people can be as confident that Dak is going to have a great year unless unless you believe that Dak is that dude. Because while I do believe it, he had some pretty damn good players he was playing with at the same time. So now he's going to have to do it with CD, who everyone thinks is going to be this hyper-targeted guy, and he might be. Dalton Schultz, who's still great. But outside of that, you don't have that third target to move the chains, to open up things for the other guys. It's just two guys, Zeke and Pollard. Maybe they use Pollard more in the slot, and that will help. But I'm definitely worried. Like all the people betting on Philadelphia to win the division, I think it's a great bet. I really do. I think it's a great bet.
For sure. That's going to be fun. It always is, and no one ever repeats in that division, so got that working in our favor. Let's get more into the actual playing of fantasy, though, because we've got through the news. I want to get to know more about what your philosophies are, kind of what you're expecting for the season. I think that's what the people want to hear. Are there any people any players that you're targeting maybe prior to week 1 who might have a chance at breaking out that first week, that maybe after that week, kind of like Elijah Mitchell last year, where he has a role week 1 and then after that there's no getting him, maybe a waiver wire guy or something like that?
That's tough because that player very well could be Sky Moore, but everyone's drafting him, right? That's very difficult, right? The Chiefs play the Arizona Cardinals week 1. And I was talking to my buddy Jordan Vanek over at the 33rd team. And he literally called me one day and all he said was, Jordan, I don't know how the Cardinals are going to survive in the secondary because I don't know a single player in their secondary right now. And it is August. So
they just made a trade. They did just make a trade.
Who do they trade for? Is it going to make a big difference or because just like, they don't have anybody out there that can cover anybody. And so you think about the Chiefs and then he was looking at more stats. Trayvon Mullen. Let's see if he can save the Arizona Cardinals defense. I don't know what they're going to do, but you just have to imagine whether it's Juju, whether it's Kelsey, whether it's MVS, whether it's Sky Moore,
who do you stop?
Someone's going to have a massive game and it's just going to rocket ship them in value in fantasy. That's one of the ones, one of the highest totals on the slate and just be DFS targets all over the place. I'm pretty sure Mahomes is the highest rated quarterback on the slate. It's just going to be crazy. And then on top of that, Kyler Murray kind of coming back. I think in that game, the guy that if I was to peg anyone, it would be probably Rondale Moore, right? Because no one wants Rondale Moore right now. Hopkins isn't going to be there. And in that high-paced, heavy game environment, the Cardinals are probably going to have to come back and pass. And if Rondale Moore is a big part of that, catches a bomb down the sideline, obviously, to your point, his value would just rocket in redraft, and you should probably trade him immediately because we don't know what the hell he's going to do. But in that game environment, he could be the guy that really explodes and gets his name out there. And people remember, they're like, oh, yeah, he was a highly touted prospect. The analytics team loved him. Super fast, super strong. But again, the production wasn't there year 1. But if he does get that role, especially without Hopkins there for the first 8 weeks, he could gain some pretty good value early in the season.
That's pretty solid. Man, Rondale Moore, I was high on him last year, especially being, Purdue guy. That is someone I had my eye on. I'm hoping so because once D-Hop comes back, I don't know that I have much hope of the ceiling for,
exactly
for the little guy.
So then how do you feel about just let me just get you off topic
Yeah,
real quick,
yeah,
just throw
of
you
course.
off. But where are you at with David Bell then? If you're a big Purdue guy.
Ooh, David Bell.
Supposed to be starting in the slot for
Right.
Cleveland. Does it matter until
Let
Watson
me
gets
check
back?
my notes. His quarterback is Jacoby Brissett. I think I'd rather eat my left foot than to put him in my starting lineup. I think that's actually pretty accurate. Look, I don't want Amari Cooper on that team.
Yeah.
Like
A lot of people,
Dave,
I've been seeing it more and more. I was kind of like, well, he should see 130 targets. And people were like, nope, not worth it. Jacoby Brissett, nope, 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 nope,
yeah,
nope. I don't know, man. At some point, it's got to be a value. I just don't know how
I'm
far you got
sure.
to go to get
I'm
there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, look, volume is nice. I've had people that I've talked to, especially when the news came out that, Brissett would be the quarterback. I had people telling me that Amari was their wide receiver 50. So I think that was a little bit
That's
of an
fair.
a little bit of an overcorrection. But yeah, you want volume, especially in the PPR league, sure. The
Yeah.
touchdown upside's not there to put him.
Yeah.
And what are you hoping for? Like a middling wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2?
No, that's it.
That's
And
his
that feels out of the
ceiling?
realm of possibility. I think you're praying he's a wide receiver 3, right? And
Yeah.
that
Well, I'm
would
talking a
probably
ceiling.
be,
Yeah, for
oh,
sure.
yeah, ceiling of, well, maybe a two touchdown game here or there. It
Sure.
can be a wide receiver 1, but yeah, it feels few
Yeah.
and far
Yeah.
between,
It doesn't
especially for a
feel.
team that runs as much as the Browns do.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if Cooper's anything more than my wide receiver 3, I'm feeling bad. That I'm having a bad time. But that's a good point though on Rondale. Good advice. Someone I'm looking for. Can you just tell me right now, is Isaiah Pacheco dead? Is my hope for him gone?
Man, dead? I don't know if it's dead because Jerick McKinnon doesn't get hurt quite a bit,
They
right? Like
kept
there is
Ronald
that.
Jones, Jordan. They
Yeah,
kept
that's a
Ronald
problem.
Jones.
But the thing was is that even though they kept Ronald Jones, hopefully Pacheco was still third on the depth chart, and I think he can do a little bit more than Ronald Jones can. I'm not sure how they view Ronald Jones. It's clear they don't like him that much. He got run behind
Right.
Pacheco in the preseason. So that's really
Right.
all we need to know. And then we're praying, maybe not praying, but if Jerick
Sure.
McKinnon does get hurt or if Clyde gets hurt, then Pacheco probably sees a bit of a role there because we know that they will use multiple backs. They're not going to commit to Clyde full time. But
Right.
again, I think the playoff usage of McKinnon last season did show us that like they do believe in him, even though we've not really seen him a lot because he's just kind of getting the veteran treatment, sitting out, having good time, relaxing. But I think he will be usable for sure. It just depends on how does they ultimately use Pacheco, and I think it's going to be few and far between early on. But I also think the same thing for Sky Moore. So, based on what we're seeing, it's not looking like Sky's going to get a ton of run. But again, in that game environment, it only takes one pass, right? And his value is just to the sky.
One wheel route. That's all I need.
That's the reality of what it is, right? Is that with these young guys, these rookies, it's one play, and all of a sudden it could only be one play, and it could only be worth 10 fantasy points, but it may send their value just to another stratosphere.
That's right. Put the double digits on my bench, and I'll find a way to put him in my lineup.
Exactly.
I'll keep the hope alive. One guy I'm also keeping the hope alive for, though, this year, this year, Jordan, I apologize. Travis is gone this week, folks. Jordan I'm keeping some hope alive for the resurgence of Trevor Lawrence this year. There's a few guys that we have who are in different positions in terms of where they're at, surrounding cast-wise, starting roles-wise. The first one I'll talk about, like I said, Trevor Lawrence. I want to ask you a specific question. What do you need to see from him to be determined successful this year, and try to get rid of that bust label that, you've been seeing everybody kind of throw at him ever since he had that disastrous rookie season with Urban Meyer?
So success is tough, right? Because he's a guy who did really struggle. He only threw one touchdown in a 9-game span, which is horrible for just about anybody. I mean, you or I could probably play quarterback for 9 games and throw a touchdown. Let's be real, right? And in that same span, he had 5 or 6 interceptions. So again, he had 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, whatever. He's a rookie. But again, people are trying. Here's my issue with Trevor Lawrence, and I don't know if you watch the show a little, but I am labeled as a Trevor Lawrence hater, and it's because I keep telling people, why are we buying Trevor Lawrence? Yes,
Yep.
he could be great. Yes, he's the golden boy. Yes, he was the number one pick.
Sure.
Yes, he had Urban Meyer. But I don't think that means you just give him a full mulligan. A lot of people are like, Urban
Yeah.
Meyer, don't care, wiping the slate clean. Doug Peterson, new offense, pro style, run and
Right.
gun, lot of quick options for him. He could be
Yeah.
really good. But again, for me in Dynasty and even in redraft in some cases, well, redraft is different. You could take a shot in redraft. He's
Sure.
dirt cheap. But in Dynasty, you still got to pay up to get this guy. So I'm kind of like,
Right.
why am I paying up for a guy who had one of the worst rookie seasons that we've seen from a number one overall pick in a long time? Like, you look at Jared Goff's rookie season when people wrote him off,
Right.
and it looks comparable to Trevor Lawrence's season. So again, obviously
Sure.
Jared Goff had his moment when he had a great coach and a great
Right.
supporting staff and all these things. But I still feel like that's the outlier. And then if you held Jared Goff the whole time, look at where his value is now,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying
Right.
that will be Trevor Lawrence, but successful, man, I'd say 25 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, maybe 12 picks. Let's try and get 2x
Sure.
our touchdowns, interceptions. Give me a 2-to-1, give me 4,000 yards because everyone expects that, right? I believe he had
Right.
3,600 last year, so he's right there.
Right.
But again, it's like he also has to win games too. They won 2 games
For
last
sure.
season.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it's kind of all in there. Where are you at with Lawrence? Like, do you think that he can hit those benchmarks? 25 touchdowns, 4K. I mean, 4K. He better get to 4K.
Sure.
But
I think
outside of that, it's tough, right?
I think it's definitely within his range of possibilities, and I'll be a little bit more distinct on it. I think yes, I think he's going to hit those this year. I like what they did with the offensive line. I wish they would have spent another pick on an offensive lineman in terms of the Trayvon Walker pick.
I think
was-
it's just. So here's my theory with this whole thing, right? This was a shitty year for the draft. Like, it wasn't good for what they needed, and they unfortunately were at the top, and everyone wanted to move down, but they couldn't. The Trayvon Walker pick, hopefully he's their guy and he fits in the system because it was questionable even in that moment, right? But it's one of those situations where like they needed a stud left tackle. There was a couple pretty good guys who were there they could have picked, but again, what are you going to do, right? They drafted a guy they believe in. Hopefully he's really good, but it was just, I think, a bad draft slot where they couldn't really do anything and couldn't really move it. And so they kind of just got screwed over in that sense.
No, that's a good point. That's good. Yeah, it's tough to move down when no one wants to move up. So I totally get that. But in terms of Lawrence, though, yeah, I think he's going to hit the benchmarks. It's hard to say that Urban Meyer was the entire problem. I think he was a lot of the problem.
For sure.
Yeah, I think, being a rookie, I think you need the structure. I think you definitely need the leadership. At the end of the day, it's not college. You're expected to know what you're doing to some extent. But I think the type of system that Doug Peterson wants to employ, I really think just having the actual leadership from a coach instead of contributing to the the outside noise. I don't think you're going to see Doug Peterson in any clubs this year. So I feel comfortable with him. On top of it, I think it's like, I don't know, it's like a babysitter. It's like, I feel comfortable Doug Peterson watching my child. That's more.
Doug Peterson is like the neighbor that and all these things, and you've seen, talked to. And Urban Meyer is like the crazy girl that you call, her number's on a telephone pole, and you have no idea who she is until she shows up.
That could be fun. It could be fun.
Could be fun. Could be a disaster.
Right?
We don't know.
Nice
We're gonna have to trust you.
Right. But no, I'm hoping. That's the key word, is hope. I think Trevor Lawrence, like you said, the benchmarks, 2xing his interceptions. I like falling back on the Peyton Manning narrative. Oh, you had a terrible rookie year too, and so did Trevor Lawrence.
That's what everyone says, but it wasn't bad. That's the problem. It wasn't this bad. It was bad. The thing with Manning was the picks. He threw a ton of picks, but he still threw touchdowns, and Trevor Lawrence did not throw that many touchdowns. And that's apologists, you people, the Trevor Lawrence apologists try and spin the narrative. Oh, well, Peyton Manning had a bad. Well, Peyton Manning wasn't that bad, and he still won some games too. I mean, I think he only won 4 games in his first season. I think he didn't win that many
13.
games.
He went 3-13, I think,
something like that. And then he turned it around and they won like 11 or 12. I'm not
Right.
expecting that of the Jags. But how? Okay, so we're on Trevor Lawrence. You think he's gonna be good?
Sure.
But how do you
Right.
feel about the supporting cast?
I think it's improved. I want to stay away from saying that it's good. I love ETN coming back. Because it's the Jags and they can't have nice things. Of course, James Robinson is injured and coming back and
Yeah,
has to reestablish himself. But I like Travis Etienne. I think that's going to be a dynamic weapon for them and going to work well with what they're going to want to do. I'm excited for the rushing upside of Trevor Lawrence working in this offense as well. I think the 330 rushing yards last year is a little bit understated. So that's what I'm excited for as well. Maybe we'll see a system with a lot more RPO action. And honestly, the weapons
should be a lot of RPO, right? A
RPOs,
lot
and
of
then
RPO.
I think that's why they focused a lot on your slot type guys with Christian Kirk. Didn't go after like one of these super high price alphas. You know, they went and got Zay Jones, who can play on the outside if need be. They still have Marvin Jones. And then what I really love in the Doug Peterson system is that they brought in Evan Ingram. Say what you want about wasted potential and what could have been in the rookie season and never following it up. You know, he's an athletic tight end, and I think we're going to see a lot of volume in that role, running off the RPO and having to read the middle of the field. So
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more success, more sustained drives, which is what you want to see out of an offense. So I do. I like the supporting cast more than last year, and I think Christian Kirk is a really underpriced asset. Even now that you know he's solidified as a quote unquote sleeper target later in your draft, I think I to me I would take him over a guy like Alan Lazard. You know,
Yeah,
I think
potentially, yeah.
I think he's definitely
He was a guy that with our patrons, I was telling months ago. I'm like, yo, Christian Kirk, expiring contract. There's no way he comes back. They don't use him enough. They clearly don't like him enough. And again, you look at him now, and he got this big contract. Again, it's guaranteed money is what it is compared to the whole thing. But I told people, I'm like, yo, he should see 150 targets. Like, no joke. Like, there's no reason why he shouldn't see just ridiculous volume to where it's like, why are we not taking this guy higher? Like, we love Brandon Cooks because he's going to get a ton of volume and he plays on a bad offense, but we don't care because he's Brandon Cooks and he's good. Maybe he isn't quite Brandon Cooks, but again, if you're getting 140 targets, 130, like that matters for fantasy, no matter what. You can say, he's got a low ceiling, blah, 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 but a lot of people out there love Trevor Lawrence. You got to love his wide receiver 1 too. If you love Trevor Lawrence, you should love his wide receiver 1 and you should be drafting him because he's probably too cheap.
Yeah, I agree. Another guy that has the fantasy community a little bit polarized, and by little bit I mean a lot, is Trey Lance and his newly signed teammate, who is 100% not the starter, right? And Jimmy G. This is such an interesting topic to me because you don't have I haven't met a single person on Twitter or anyone in the community that's like, yeah, I think Trey Lance will be just all right. Like, no, it's either he's going to smash this year or he's going to be absolute garbage, and Jimmy G will be playing week 4. So where do you land on it? And let me ask you another follow-up question to address as well. Since we're on the topic of success, Jimmy G brought this team to an end, brought in the same way that, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
like
Debo dragged him, kind of.
Right.
Is really what this happened.
Right. Yeah.
He steered the cart, and Debo was the actual driver.
Right. Exactly. Goodness. Yeah. So Jimmy G played in an NFC Championship game and Super Bowl. What does Trey Lance have to do to be successful? And if he falls short of that early, if he projects not to meet those benchmarks, so to speak, are we going to see a Jimmy G sighting? Please tell me no.
I don't think I can tell you no. I don't think I can tell you even. I don't think I can even tell you maybe not. Like, the biggest problem with this situation is that, to your point, like, it's not that is Trey Lance the starter, because Trey Lance is a starter. We know this. But, I mean, if Trey Lance is even having a bad game, what's stopping them from throwing in Jimmy G, who they trust to close out a game, or if Trey Lance is struggling in a 2-minute drill, or whatever the case may be? Like, we saw them bring in Trey Lance for certain plays last season. Now, it's not quite the same because Trey Lance has a different skill set than Jimmy G, but Jimmy G has a different skill set than Trey Lance as well, right? And so I think that's part of it too, is like, we've seen quarterbacks get pulled before who are young because they have really bad games. And I don't think that Trey Lance is immune to that. I think he'll be the starter all year. He'd have to be really bad, like 1-6, just throwing tons of picks to really get benched. But the problem for me is that I think no matter how bad Trey Lance was, if Jimmy G was gone, you get him for the whole year. You look at Trevor Lawrence, he was god awful, but he wasn't coming out of that game ever. Right?
For sure.
Now with a team that went to the NFC Championship game last year, wants to win, wants to go to Super Bowls, like if he does really struggle, they have to at least consider making that switch. And that's the situation that fantasy managers did not want to be in this season because they love what Trey Lance could be. As far as success, I mean, Niners fans have to at least expect a second round playoffs, like get to the divisional round at least. I think that's fair. Not to say the championship game or anything, but you have to, like, if he's going to be our starting quarterback, he still has to help us win games. And if he's not doing that, why is he there when we have Jimmy G, who is a winner, Super Bowl contender, NFC Championship game last season, even with, some injuries and not looking the best at times, they still have that on the roster, and that's always going to be in the back of their heads. They wanted Jimmy gone. Now he's gone, but maybe the grass won't be greener on the other side. I think that's really the issue for us in fantasy land. Trey Lance should be a top 10 quarterback if he's good. If he's not, I mean, who knows how low that could be? Like you said, kind of that range of outcomes is super wide, but he has the rushing floor. But as an actual, like, what is a success for him? Has to be playoffs minimum. Like, you got to make the playoffs. And I think you have to make the divisional round. If you lose in the wild card, I think that's a failure. Like, I really do for that team. I think that is a failure. Depending on injuries, like if they're fully healthy, I think that you should at least expect the divisional, and I think their fans definitely expect at least the championship game again.
I mean, because the whole argument was this is the guy that offers us things that Jimmy G can't. We already know that the 49ers trust Jimmy G. It was never we don't want him. It's that we drafted the successor, the guy that can put us over the top. I've always had conversations with people over the last year that Jimmy G is your average quarterback. He's literally middle of the pack. He is a guy that if you have a great team around you, he will be good enough to not be the reason you lose. But he's not good enough to not be the reason you win. So Trey Lance, I agree. He has to win in the playoffs, and if he doesn't, especially in those first 6 games, they've got a really easy schedule. The first
easy start,
6 games, 4 of the first 6 games are against, sub 500 opponents from last year. So, if you see, if even 3-3, 2-4, you start to see that. And now you're talking about
3-3 is not good enough. No, I don't believe that it is. Like for what their schedule is going to become down the stretch. Like I don't think 3-3 is good enough. It sounds crazy. No. And maybe they're close games, so let's not, overreact too much. But Niners fans aren't going to be happy with that. 3-3 is not. That's not why we gave up. That's not why we wanted to get rid of Jimmy G. That's not why we do this. Like Eric Crocker, me and Ray interviewed him and talked to him about stuff, and he's like, the reason why you want a guy like Trey Lance is because when the play breaks down, he can play above the X's and O's. Is the exact wording that he used. Right? He can play above whatever's in front of him. When the play breaks down, he can make a play. Jimmy G's not doing that, right? No. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that just can't really do that. But Trey Lance is a guy that if he gets it right, he could be some form of what Josh Allen is right now, right? He has that type of raw ability and skill set, but he's still going FCS to the NFL level, right? He's still going from basically not playing in the last 4 years because he didn't really play in the COVID year. The year before that, he had his phenomenal season. Didn't play last year. So now he's finally playing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no interceptions, right? The 40 touchdowns, no picks.
Year. Right.
Oh, man, insane. Yeah. But again, new game, new 2 years removed from that season. Whole new world, completely different. But again, from what you've seen of him, he's looked pretty good. So I hope that he can get it done. But yeah, success is definitely at least divisional round, and they better lose to the Rams if it's in the divisional round.
There you go. Yeah, definitely sky high expectations. And one other note before we move on to the next couple of guys I want to talk about is that Jimmy G was voted as the 105th player on the NFL list of 100. So apparently NFL guys like him. So that's something. I don't think it's that huge of a deal, but obviously he holds some clout among NFL players. So definitely valued within an NFL locker room.
I think a lot of teams would
Yeah.
want him, honestly. It's just
Oh,
the
for sure.
Niners weren't willing to give him up, and what was the price and the shoulder
Right.
injury. It's unfortunate
Right.
because it seemed like he could have got a job on one of those lesser teams,
I
but
think
they
so.
didn't really want to give him up, and especially to Seattle was one of the
Yeah.
big things why they didn't want to get rid of him. They didn't want him to end up on Seattle and things like that. So
Right.
I totally get it from their standpoint.
For sure. For sure. Be interesting to see where he goes. Injury seems like the only way he's going to find a job this year.
Yeah.
If he agrees to be traded. So the next team, another hot topic, another developing unit. There's some storylines here to dive into over in Las Vegas. So you've got 3 guys, all starting with these. So you've got Devante Adams, Derek Carr, Darren Waller. All big, high-profile names, have different accomplishments. I'll start off with let's go with Derek Carr. Okay, we'll talk about the success of Derek Carr because then we can kind of trickle down into the weapons. Derek Carr, is he going to be a top 6 quarterback this year? Is my main question because
top 6.
It sounds
That's
crazy.
bold.
It is bold, but it's what's being expected from a lot of people now that, he's got Devante Adams and, Renfro's now a thing. And, Darren Waller, there's nothing changed from Darren Waller from now between, 2020 and now. So he's got to be the same player, right? So Derek Carr, most pass attempts that he's ever had in his career last year, throws for 4,800 yards. What's stopping him, Jordan, now with Devante Adams from being a top 6 guy?
I think he's just not good enough. Like, I think that's just the reality of the
Bold.
situation.
Right
Josh
there.
Allen, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, Patrick
Right.
Mahomes,
Derek
Jalen
Carr.
Hurts. Yeah, Trey Lance. Like, I think Kirk Cousins could be a QB1 ahead of
Sure.
him. Like,
Right.
again, I understand what you're saying. I understand the case you're making. I still think that a great bet, and I know the odds have been shifting a lot recently, is if you want to bet in the league in passing yards, I'm like, all right, sign me up.
Yeah.
But he had 4,800 yards and he only threw 23 touchdowns. Like, that's
that is.
I'm assuming
tough.
that will change, but it's weird. And again, to your point, right? Darren Waller was hurt, didn't have Devante Adams. A lot of things have changed for them, and I think what we're seeing right now is, are they going to run as much? We'll see. I think that's my biggest sticking point with them, and why I'm not necessarily all in on Derek Carr is that if Josh McDaniels runs a system that the Patriots ran, they're not going to throw the ball a lot. Like, they're going to be running the ball a ton down people's throats, and it's going to be boring, and you're not going to have fun watching it. Nope. The only time they're going to throw is when they're behind in a game to the Denver Broncos, to the Kansas City Chiefs, or the Chargers, right? And then on top of that, I believe they also have to play the NFC West, so they will see the Cardinals, they'll see the Rams, they'll see the Seahawks, but they'll also see the Niners.
Right.
So those are, what's that, 9 games on their schedule that are going to be tough. And so while he could throw a ton of yards, like, these are teams that don't just have great offenses, but also have great defenses on top of that. So it's going to be very tough for the Raiders. Everyone's betting them to come in last in division. It's no slight to them, but the teams around them, the teams are going to play, are just so talented. I'm not really sure how he could be a QB1. I just think there's too many good quarterbacks in the league. I'm just not quite there. Could he surprise me and maybe be like 8 or 9? Of course, but 6 is a little bit too bold for me.
Yeah, I tend to fall on that. He has never really finished as a top QB in his touchdown rate. And that's really my main argument for putting him that high. Look, if we're realistically saying it's a possibility for this guy to throw 5,000 yards, I have questions. One of them you already brought up in the system that's being brought in. You fall on a lot of, they brought in Devante Adams, which is a nice segue into talking about Devante Adams and his expectations, in that they paid the man, what was it? Was it 140 or 170 million dollars? I can't remember how much.
Yeah, his total contract now.
It's ridiculous. And whether or not he sees all the money is another thing. But now he's on the team. He's got his college quarterback. If we're following the narrative, reconnecting with college roommates, Devante Adams, top 5 I feel like that's realistic and probably probable. What do you think the chances that he doesn't finish, or what would you say would have to happen for him not to finish inside the top 5?
Not to finish inside the top 5. I think the case is really just, are the Raiders good, right? Like, I think he's probably got double-digit touchdowns in his arsenal, 1,100 yards. Like, I honestly think he should be a guy who goes for 1,500 and probably 12. I think
Sure.
he's going to see upwards of 150 to 170 targets. I think it just comes down to
Yeah.
is Derek Carr really going to hyper target him? And are we going to see that this season?
Hmm.
He's not a guy who really does that. But at the same time, we've seen Josh McDaniels and that old Patriot system really feature one guy, and they'll get 150 targets. They'll
Right.
have wide receiver one seasons. And Adams, we know, is a guy who's capable of doing that. But to people's points, like, you still do have Darren Waller there, who's pretty damn good. You still have Hunter
Right.
Renfrow, who can still move the chains and be kind of a
Right.
thorn in that ceiling that we expect from Adams. So again, I think it just comes down to is how is he ultimately utilized? What does his target share look like? We expect
Right.
massive things, like maybe not
Sure.
Justin Jefferson target ceiling,
Right.
Cooper Kupp
Right.
last season target ceiling, but
Yeah.
pretty damn close as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see what happens with him, but I think that there's a really good shot he's top 5. I'd say it's about a coin flip, right? I think
Right.
he's probably got a pretty damn good shot, but I think there's always a chance that you don't be a wide receiver or a top 5 wide receiver, really what you asked me. So I
For
think he's
sure.
probably about 50-50, which is pretty
Yeah.
reasonable. Like, if you draft a guy in
Yeah.
the top 5, you hope he's top 5. If he's
Right.
7 or 8, you can live with it, right?
Right. For sure. That wouldn't kill you with where you're drafting him. But with how much they're throwing, so last year, brought it up. It was the most that Derek Carr had ever thrown in his career thus far. If Devante Adams brings in his previous target count and percentage, you're talking about if he has 160 targets with how much they threw last year, and that's the most. You're still looking at about a 25% target share, which moves us into the next guy I want to talk about, and Darren Waller. Look, if he has the 145 targets that he saw in 2020, are we confident that two guys are going to make up 50% of the target share in this offense? Like, is that where we're living right now?
I mean, realistically, maybe. Maybe. I mean,
Sure.
we've seen this before where some teams just hyper target 2 or 3 guys, and these are the clear
Right.
2. Like, let's be honest. We may
For sure.
like Hunter Renfrow, and he can
Yeah.
command targets, especially on third downs. But at the end of the day, like, if they got 50%, I wouldn't be shocked. Devante Adams is a
For
guy
sure.
who's commanded upwards of 30% of the targets on his team before, and he's a guy
Yeah.
who deserves that. Number 6 player on the top 100, probably the best route runner in the league. I mean, he's a guy who gets it done
Yeah.
no matter what. It just comes down to is how does Derek Carr operate? And that's the biggest problem,
Right.
is that if it was last season, I'd say, oh yeah, sky's the limit. Like, they're gonna keep throwing it. They threw the ball a ton last season. They know they're gonna have to do it this year.
Right.
But they have a new system, they have a new coordinator, they have a new offense. So it may not operate the way we're used to seeing. And honestly, well, I think he'll
Yeah.
throw about the same. I don't think we're going to see this. Everyone's expecting like 700 attempts because they're going to be down. They're going to have to throw.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's going to be like that. We've seen teams before where they should be throwing every play, but they don't do that. And then they wonder why they lose games. And it's because they can't
Right.
keep up, and they just want to run their system their way. And that's what
Yeah.
happens. I think there's a world where he could definitely throw a lot. I don't know if we'll see them both see that high of a target share, but I think it's definitely in the realm of possibilities. If I'm giving a percentage, I'd say like 30%, because I think the backs are going to get some targets. I think that
Right.
Renfrow will get enough to where push those guys down just a little bit. I think one of them could definitely see a massive one. I think it's going to be Adams, and then we'll see where
sure.
Waller ultimately falls into the fold, because I'm not sure about you, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this. Do you
Yeah.
think that Waller can take targets away from Adams, or do you think that it'll mostly just be like Adams? To me, is just so foolproof that he's going to get it
Right.
done regardless of the game situation, whatever.
Right.
Waller, we'll see how they scheme him and how well he plays, but he is, dealing with a hamstring injury. He's,
Right.
waiting for that money to come in,
Right. I was gonna say, I
and
feel
then
like it's
maybe
gonna
I'm
be
sure it will
cured.
magically get better. Yeah,
Yeah.
it will be just fine once he gets the money, but we'll see. Like, how do you feel about both those two guys? Do you think they can get that 50%? Or are you kind of like, well, it's kind of a lot, personally?
I think that's a lot. I think Darren Waller, albeit his talent is undeniable, his role in that offense is more so challenged than a guy like Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow is a guy I still think that Devante Adams not necessarily going to be treated like he was in Green Bay, where on third down that is Devante Adams' role. We
Yeah.
have a proven third down guy as well in Hunter Renfrow, who can get open at a very very good rate and is trusted, more importantly, by Derek Carr. So I think we're going to see a lot of Hunter Renfrow as well. I don't want to forget about him. I think with the arrival of Adams, I think that's more so going to dig into Darren Waller's role. Darren Waller, look, it's not like you said, he's a good route runner, and I think in the system that they're going to run, I think it's going to ask Darren Waller to do a lot of what Gronk did. I think you're going to
Yeah.
see a lot of option routes. I think you're going to see a lot of seams. I think you're going to see a lot of red zone work. That's where I'm really excited about Darren Waller, is in the red zone, because that's where you need to have trust, but you also need to have size, and he has that. So whereas
Yeah.
we might see less volume from Darren Waller, you could even it out with what we look for in a tight end every single fantasy season, and what will keep him in relevance, in my opinion, is the touchdown upside. So we've seen touchdowns buoy the value for tight ends. So whereas, yeah, I'm definitely thinking Devante's going to take more away from than Waller than anyone else. I think that Waller's still going to have that top 5 tight end upside easily.
Oh, absolutely. I think, to your point, if they can get to the red zone and they can move the ball down the field with effectiveness, you have 3 excellent red zone options in Waller,
Right.
Renfrow, and Adams, right? Adams will get a lot of the attention. We may see Waller get some attention. But we've seen Renfrow use his own abilities to score touchdowns as well. So you think about, from those 3 guys, if McDaniels is smart, he'll scheme up plays where, you'll see Waller as a decoy, you'll see Adams as a decoy for the other one. And then if everything else fails, you still have Hunter Renfrow to move for you and score touchdowns, because he's shown that ability as well. So I think in those red zone packages, they will be very difficult to stop, as long as, again, they choose to pass the ball instead of run the ball in,
Right.
like we've seen in New England for the past 30 years.
God, please don't. I just don't want this to be West Coast New England. Like that's really that's really, please let us have a division where every team is, has the potential of catching fire, and one of them just doesn't turn to stone. Like, please, it would just kill me, man.
Just give me straight air raid in the whole division. Just spread and just run
700
all
pass
day
attempts
long
for every single team.
Yeah.
We could. All right, so Raiders or Broncos then, because I don't know what to make of Jerry Jeudy. I like Cortland Sutton with Russell Wilson. Javonte Williams is a beast. Do you like that offense more than the Raiders?
So it's funny, because, to your point, like, it's kind of close. The thing that really separates for me, I think, is the running backs, right?
Right.
When you say Josh Jacobs and Zamir White, I'm like, Josh Jacobs, and you see Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, I'm like, oh, okay, like, we can work with them. They can catch passes, they can run the ball. Like, there's so much more upside from the running back position, in my opinion. And then on top of that, obviously, I love Russ more than Derek Carr, just from an upside perspective. The weapons are what they are. With Tim Patrick, I think they're obviously much more formidable. I think you have way more options. I still love Jeudy. I think Jeudy could be phenomenal. Like, we saw what he could do simply in the sophomore season when he won the Blitnikoff Award at Alabama. Like, the upside is there. It's just, can he put it all together? He was doing okay before he sprained his ankle last season. But again, I think Russ is the guy that can unlock that, right? If he gives you Tyler Lockett, you're not upset. And then you can still get DK Metcalf out of Cortland Sutton. And those are 2 massive ceilings for wide receivers. So I think the offense is going to be unreal. It's how much they turn it loose, because, again, for the Raiders, they could abandon the run a little bit because they don't have so much talent. They have to stick with those guys. But in my opinion, in Denver, they should be running the ball consistently, because they have these guys that can do it. They can work the game slowly. We can say let Russ cook all the time, and he will have his moments for sure. He'll have to, but there'll be moments too where Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams get it done as well. And so I think that balanced approach is going to be very good for Denver. And on top of that, the defense for Denver, much better than it is in Vegas, right? So that's a big factor too, from just a winning perspective. The Vegas defense is not good, especially the secondary. So you think about that division, and the NFC West they're going to play with that secondary is scary hours for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, if we're going to separate what we want to happen from what's realistically going to happen, I think that we're going to see the Raiders be that odd man out in that division, where they don't have the defense, they don't have the superstar high-powered offense, they don't have as good a quarterback. I'll just put it as plainly as that. Sometimes keep it simple. And the team with the less special quarterback, I won't say bad, but less special, is probably going to be left out of the playoffs, where we'll probably see 3 of those teams in. Man, good fantasy stuff. I want to quickly transition, Jordan, into just an easier question, a more lifestyle question, something to get to know you a little bit more before we say goodbye and thank you for joining the show. As a content creator, What are some things that you have, like what are your biggest obstacles? Obviously, you come up with ideas constantly. You're a producer for Ray G, who, and a co-host who he stopped by the show to say give you well wishes here. What are some things that you find as a challenge when you're kind of in season or even out of season and you're trying to come up with content to share to the people?
I think in season, you just by that point you can't worry about it, and that would be
Right.
my advice to everybody. By the time the season actually gets there, look, don't get me wrong, I am doing a lot right now because the season isn't quite here yet.
Right.
But what I would say to anybody is like, if it's week 1 or week 2 and you're trying to implement new ideas, you got to be one spending all your time on them, or just like super dedicated, or have a really big team to support you, because it's so difficult to make changes in the middle of the season. All of us, we grind, we write articles, we do podcasts, we do other shows with other people. We're watching every game, trying not to miss anything, track all the stats, the box scores, the advanced stats, the route runs, like all this stuff you have to keep track of just to literally be average. Like just to
Right.
be average, we have to track all that stuff. And if
Absolutely.
you don't, you're falling behind. So for me, the biggest problem is that like you need to have a plan in the off season and then slowly use that time to implement those things. The biggest challenge, I think, for me, honestly, is coming up with new ideas. Like I may
Right.
have a great idea once, and I'm like, man, I don't know when the next good idea is going to come. This was a really good
Right.
one, and it worked out, and I don't know when the next one's going to come. And the biggest thing, and what I would challenge everyone to do is like just to keep trying new things. Ask your friends,
Yeah.
like, how could I be better? What is something that you would love to see me do that I haven't done yet, or whatever it is? Like that's where Ray and I are really good. He'll bring me an
Mhm.
idea that I'll be like, this is the worst idea you've ever had, but I have to at least entertain it, because I
Right.
don't come up with any ideas. He's the one that comes up with the ideas. So that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
for me, is I think you have to just be willing to try and fail. And that's general advice for anything. But in content
Right.
creation, if I didn't try and fail doing things, or try and succeed doing things just to be like, can I do this? Like I
Right.
wouldn't know half the stuff I know right now. So that's the biggest thing, is like, if I never try, like back in the day, I don't even know if you would know this, but
Mhm.
when we started to do our very first show, I
Right.
was like, how can we make it look different than other people's? And I was like, here's a great idea. I'm just going to take like the template for PTI and we're going to rip it off. And we're going to call it our own show.
It was
And
great.
that's exactly what we did. And people were like, holy shit, this looks so different than everything else you've
Yeah.
ever seen. And it really helped us, gain traction early. But in that moment, I was like, I'm never going to have an idea this good ever again. Like, this is my greatest, this is my
Right.
Mona Lisa. Like, I will never have a better idea than this. But the
Right.
thing is that ideas will come, and you just have to practice and try. And the amount of skills I learned just making that taught me a ton. And so this just
That's awesome.
continues to compound itself. Like people don't know this, and maybe you don't even know this, but I've
Mhm.
entirely self-taught in everything we've done,
Yeah.
from audio
For
to
sure.
video to editing. Like, so
Yeah.
again, I don't have any classical training. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just kind of learn on the fly, try new things,
Yeah.
and it's worked out so far. So I
Yeah.
mean, clearly I'm doing
Killing it.
something right. But yeah, I think that's kind of my advice. It's practice,
Yeah.
it's trying new things, getting out of your comfort zone, and not being
Right.
afraid to ask for ideas or help, because that always helps too. But definitely do it in the off season. In season,
For sure.
work
Yeah.
on learning and getting better and all those things for your product. In the off
Right.
season, expand your product, make your product better. But it's very difficult to do that in the middle of the season for sure.
Man, great advice, man. And yeah, I could definitely attest to, especially being a smaller operation, when you have an idea that you want to implement, it's awesome. How do I learn to be a video editor, a graphic creator, you're kind of wearing all of the hats that you find.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can tell you just from being a consumer of your product and a very big fan that you're doing a hell of a job. I watch you guys
Appreciate
three
that.
times a week. And it's
Thank
just
you.
such an easy listen, and you know what? It's something else that drives me and our team to just be great as well, because it's awesome seeing the people that we support doing so well. So,
Oh
Jordan,
man, you guys are doing awesome things. Like, first step, audio. If you're listening here, first step is audio.
yeah,
You have the
for
audio.
sure,
Second step is video, if you do video. And you look great. And you're already
I
ahead of
appreciate that,
90% of
man.
people. Genuinely. Like, people ask me all
Appreciate
the time,
that.
how can I get better? Audio first, video second. You have both. And there it's just
Right?
getting your message out to the people. That's all it is.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And coming from you,
Yeah.
means the world. Hey man,
Yeah.
thanks so much for stopping by though. This has been awesome. It's been awesome chatting it up, talking fantasy. I look forward to interacting with you during the season and kind of picking your brain.
Definitely.
And look forward to maybe having you on the show sometime in the future again. This has been great.
Whenever you
man.
want. Whenever you want. Thank you so much for having me. But yeah, anytime you need. I told this to the Front Yard Fantasy guys too, and unfortunately they took me up on it a couple times. Whenever you need, just let me know, and I can hop on anytime. Like I said, it's late, but it's just
Right.
because I'm not used to it. That's not. I'm up till like 1
Right.
o'clock in the morning every day. Even if I have a show the next day, just it is what it
Perfect.
is, and it's fun. But I really appreciate you having me. So thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, like I said, if you need a co-host in a pinch, whatever, I can always hop on and chat up with you for sure.
Appreciate that. And you heard it here, guys. Whenever I want. Jordan,
I mean
you so
it.
much, man.
I mean it. JL took me up on it one time with like 6 hours notice, and I did it, but only because I offered. Right? That's the problem.
Yeah,
I'm a man of my word.
You let him know.
Yeah, I'm a man of my word. But damn,
Yeah,
don't push it.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding.
Right. No, I appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it. The people appreciate it. It's been awesome. Again. Make sure you follow him at your boy Jay Rich. You can find him on YouTube, Wake Up TV, and the Wake Up with Ray G show on YouTube. Jason, thanks again. Thanks a million times. And for everyone listening and watching, remember, losing sucks. Don't do it.
Yes, sir.